So in terms of what we thought we were being asked to present, I'm going to give you kind of a big picture perspective on it. I know you've previously spoken to Kevin. Mark's going to talk about some of the specific work we do. But I guess there was a question about kind of how, I think it was almost kind of how committed are we to this? So meeting the climate emergency is part of, we try to make it part of everything we do. We don't always succeed, but we try. It was part of the platform I ran on to get elected. So I was elected to the City Council in May 2019 and became leader later that month. And one of my manifesto pledges was carbon neutral by 2030. When I put together my first cabinet, I'm allowed to appoint 10 cabinet members in total. One of them is Kevin Freer, who you've met. He's my deputy, which is a decision made by the Labor group. And he's also the cabinet member for the climate emergency. And we always talk about that as being across all portfolios. So we try not to silo climate emergency work as being just one thing, but try to recognise that it is part of everything in every portfolio. And so Kevin's portfolio is very clearly set up to allow him to kind of wander across other people's portfolios and talk about climate emergency. So if we're talking about housing, where does the climate emergency fit in that? If we're talking about managing parks, how does the climate emergency fit in that? So Kevin is one of my 10 cabinet members. At the beginning of 2020, we had the council formally adopt 3 new cross-cutting priorities, which were meet the climate emergency, build community wealth, strengthen community engagement. So the People's Jury meets 2 of those 3, and we hope that when we get your recommendations and they talk about spending, that they will also contribute to community wealth. So the discussions you've been having about local food supply, using local businesses, sourcing things more locally will contribute to the community wealth agenda. We also, I guess, play a bit of a role in showing up in other places and talking about the importance of meeting the climate emergency. So I'm also a county councillor, and I introduced the climate emergency motion at Lancashire County Council. Unfortunately, I could not convince the County Council to declare a climate emergency. And one of my county councillor colleagues even told me there was nobody in Lancashire affected by climate change, which for somebody who represents people who flood, made me somewhat cranky in that moment. But they did agree that they would look at how they could become carbon neutral by 2030, although in a pretty wishy-washy way. So we're part of other networks amongst councils. So Kevin does lead some work for the LGA around climate change. We're part of a rural councils network. We do that kind of thing. And I guess coming back to what Pete was saying at the beginning, we're very aware that we're committed to meeting our goal, but we're 0.04% of the carbon emitted in the district. So it'll be good when we meet our goal, but actually to really make a difference, we need to take as many people with us as possible. So you are in fact part of that. So part of why we wanted to have a People's Jury was to have a better understanding of how our residents understood the issue and of what you wanted us to do, what we could do to help you and how that works. But we've been having a kind of ongoing conversation about how we, reshape our economic strategy to be more focused on the climate emergency as well as social justice, and how we kind of make this all one policy. And so then we start to talk about something called Plan 2030. And I don't know if any of you joined the big community conversation around wellbeing, but it's also linked to that project. So the idea of the Plan 2030 is to write a plan for the district, not just the council, that has that climate emergency target in it. We also hope it'll have a number of other targets around wellbeing, social justice, economic justice, and maybe other things, because they'll come from other people, and that we will build a coalition of residents, organisations, institutions behind that, because that's how we'll make real change. It's got to be more than the City Council. And also, there's a little bit of sandbagging on our behalf there. We're a minority. This council is in no overall control. The second largest group on the council are the Conservatives. Should we lose control to them at the next election, hopefully, if they've signed up to Plan 2030 and all sorts of other people have signed up to Plan 2030, the district keeps going on that track towards meeting the climate emergency, even if the City Council became less committed to it or had other priorities. So we're trying very much to make the climate emergency, meeting the climate emergency, central to everything we do, and also to play a role in building coalitions and raising it with other organisations that we work in. So there's a whole lot of people writing recovery plans at the moment. Each time I get one, I look at it and kind of go, how does the climate emergency fit into that? Where's the decarbonisation agenda on that? You know, what are we